First, I wanted to thank Lorenzo. It seems every time I see him, I thank him for writing this. So I want to thank him again for writing this wonderful, inspiring, intelligent, and scholarly piece on Leonard Covello. And secondly, I want to thank Jonathan because he's done such a wonderful job, and the board, to really provide a level of scholarship that has the name Bank Street on it. And I think the occasional papers as a series are really very solid, usable, inspiring, necessary pieces to read and to use in classes and in our practice out in schools. I want to pick up on two strands of that I see in progressive thinking, exemplified by Leonard Covello, that relate to the topic at hand, which is school and community. And these two strands are the moral and the political. And I want to also, I start by situating myself as a member of this community, Bank Street, and so I ask this question personally, but also I ask it as a member of this community. So we at Bank Street fix our moral compass to a set of beliefs about children, teachers, leaders in schools, centered around the enduring progressive principles exemplified by educators like Mitchell, Jane Addams, John Dewey, George Counts, and of course Leonard Covello. For us, being accountable means aligning our practice around these progressive beliefs. Yet, what I see so often in too many schools is what I think as a crippled view of progress, a view fed by the unremitting surveillance of kids, teachers, principals, and schools that results in a morally bankrupt understanding of accountability. And I don't use these words lightly. I really think it is morally bankrupt. So with that as a premise, I have the three questions that I want to just briefly discuss. One is, how does power operate to subvert progressive change and fracture school-community relations? Two, how can a school manage to sustain vibrant democratic links to a community in an age of advanced technology? And three, how do we breathe life into our legacy, our progressive legacy? Or to put very simply, can these old bones live? Because they've been around a while. So as far as the first question, how does power operate to subvert progressive change and fracture school-community relations? I think Debbie gave us a very, very good analysis of that. And I would call it succinctly at this point, one important aspect of it on the micro level is what we can call data overload. Teachers, schools, principals are inundated with a plethora of data. One of my students called it heartbreaking. And I think this is an emotional, moral, political, and pedagogical concern. It's particularly invidious and insidious with second language learners, immigrants, and children with special needs. It hits them hardest. One of my students who wrote in the journal, if one looks at the testing schedule of my school, then one can clearly wonder what is being tested, as there hasn't been enough time to apply what has been taught. We're always in a cycle of gathering, assessing, categorizing, and sorting data. As Bob Dylan says, it doesn't take a weatherman to know which way the wind is blowing, right? In modern technological advanced societies, such as ours, power is usually exerted in a range of nameless, anonymous ways, through forms, through charts, through tables, and tightly parsed regulations, through carefully calibrated, neatly ordered categories. Typically, calls for more accountability result in standardization, predictability of outcome, tightened security, a narrow, insidious understanding of progress. So we need to know how power works in order to confront it. It's particularly hard because it has, I would say, an anonymous, faceless character to it. How do you confront the form? How do you confront the table? How do you confront a ranking? The larger issues that Debbie talked about, there are policy issues, of course. But when you're in that school, who's the enemy? How do you confront it? I think Covello served as a great example of what it takes to broaden and deepen what it means to be an educational leader beyond and not at the expense of the norms of management and efficiency. I'm not arguing that educators should not be efficient or be managers, but I think the spectrum has gone full circle to an extreme value on management and efficiency at the expense of the values that Lorenzo and Debbie are talking about. The second question, how can a school manage to sustain vibrant democratic links to its community in an age of advanced technology? Dewey, for one, had his doubts. So I went back to read a book he published in 1927 called The Public and Its Problems. And he writes, the local face-to-face community has been invaded by forces so vast, so remote in initiation, so far-reaching in scope, that they're, from the standpoint of local social units, such as the school, unknown. So that the consequences of a modern technologically advanced society, as Dewey saw it in his time, was producing what he calls, quote, a social and intellectual uniformity, a standardization favorable to mediocrity. Mass production, he writes, is not confined to the factory. But having said this, I wonder if he could have even imagined the degree to which this is happening in so many schools today. So principals get over 100 emails a day from the Department of Education. A school receives a lettered grade, A through F, that's published. A teacher's performance is tracked via test scores. And we have to ask ourselves, is this progress? Who's defining it? Who owns that notion of progress? So tools of technology in themselves are not enough to assure progress as we progressives would define it. They must be linked to what Dewey calls a public, which is a curious, invested, active group of people who organize themselves around a concern that they hold in common. I want to show just, or read one example. There's a school that some of you may know about. The two leaders were Bank Street graduates, and they are co-leaders of a school in Brooklyn called Community Roots. It got an F on its report card. So one parent decided to write and take action. He became, as Dewey would say, a public. He was active, invested, curious, and passionate about responding. So he writes in a local newspaper, and I'm quoting, "The F has caused great confusion among the Community Roots parent population. This Monday, at the second of 2 meetings in 4 days with concerned parents, Ms. Keel, one of the directors, described the grade as an anomaly. Demographics, statistics, and high-stakes test scores do not begin to describe what a school truly means to its community. And this is perhaps the most damaging impact of the DOE's failing any public school. By attempting to quantify success with the results of a series of 1 to 3 day tests, the whole dynamic of an individual school is obscured. Those measures don't count positive interactions between students, faculty, and parents, individual success, and the establishment of a community that cuts across economic, racial, and social strata." And then he goes on to say, "Community Roots has created a remarkable and diverse community of children who are achieving to high educational standards. The parents are now engaged in a letter writing campaign. They're taking action. They're not settling for the F, even though it's been given to them." There's another example. We might look at Steve Goodman's work in Educational Video Center. And Steve uses technology with children to narrow the gap between school and community. So kids go out with video cameras. They ask their own questions to members of the community. They define the questions. They come up with the answers. They ask questions that are powerful and meaningful to them to make sense of their world at this moment in time. And just a little quote from the mission of EVC. The Educational Video Center is a nonprofit youth media organization dedicated to teaching documentary video as a means to develop the artistic, critical literacy, and career skills of young people, while nurturing their idealism and commitment to social change. EBC's teaching methodology brings together the powerful traditions of student-centered progressive education and independent community documentary. So what do they make documentaries about? Undocumented immigrant youth, the credit card industry, stereotypes in the media, body image and gender roles, youth depression, video games, schools and integration, food consumption, homophobia, gentrification, and more. So this is important work that I think resonates so powerfully with what Leonard Covello was doing in his day in the 40s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. The third question, how do we breathe life into our legacy, our progressive legacy? Can these old bones live? I hope they can. I have a biased response to it. So recently, again, Bill was here. Bill Ayers was here. He came to a Weissman dinner where Ann Cook was talking, who's doing extraordinary work in her way in a public school. And Bill urged us to resist feeling embattled, small, or precious. Those were his words. It wasn't a question, he said, of being optimistic or pessimistic, but rather to cultivate what he called the politics of confidence, by which he means to be active, alert, attentive to challenges that they encounter, in motion. And there are many things to be attentive to today. There are many dangers. So do we need to hold on to a vision of community as a gathering of people engaged in face-to-face encounters with one another in order to maintain our identity as progressive educators? I think we do, but I see it as a prerequisite, not a guarantee. I think it depends on how technology is used. And that would make all the difference. Because we've seen some not very good examples, bad examples. I want to conclude by getting back to this notion of the moral aspect of our work. And say that I believe that as progressives, there is a moral arc to our work. Qualities such as courage, steadiness, friendship, modesty, decency when confronting people we have serious disagreements with, forgiveness, and even our willingness to doubt and examine the very principles we hold dear do matter. These qualities matter. The moral dimension of our work needs far greater attention, especially at this moment with what passes for school reform and progress.